Hello everyone, welcome to today's session on Streamline Sociology, which is addressed to 2021 aspirants. In today's lecture, we will try to understand CSM 2020 papers, we will try to analyze them, and consequently we will try to come up with a plausible strategy for 2021. Why did we choose this name, Streamline? Streamline means getting rid of the excess material and try to focus on what is necessary. We may be in different stages of preparation. Some would have covered paper 1, some would have covered paper 2, while others may also have done PYQs. There are some students who have also made certain notes. But as we know that even though we are in different stages of preparation, the exam date is fixed. So each one has to speeden up his or her preparation according to the level of preparation they are in. And how do we do it? By getting rid of the unnecessary features in our preparation, getting rid of the irrelevant study materials, and focus our energies on those features or those parts of the syllabus which are necessary for a good score in the paper. At the same time, along with the preparation of the static portion, a certain amount of attention is also required on current affairs. When we look at the questions which are asked in sociology, we can divide them or classify them into 4 types. First one are those questions which are direct. Second one is that section which refers to those questions which are interrelated, or perhaps P2 questions are being asked in P1, paper 1. Many questions you will find which will be related to the news or current affairs, and finally there will be some questions which will be tangential or which will seem to be the surprise factor of the paper. So we will call it the DINT strategy to tackle 2021. The first section will be on paper 1. We will try to give you a brief overview of paper 1 questions. As we know that each paper is divided into 2 sections, and each section consists of 4 questions each with subparts. So in section A, in the question 1, we had 5 compulsory questions. All these questions were direct questions, and there were many sources for these questions. For example, the question on emergence could be answered with the help of Ritzer. Then sociology, a value-free science and methodology, we could have answered using Nitin Sangwan. Similarly, ideal types. There was a tricky part, which was that they do not correspond to reality. This part had to be taken care of because it means that there is no scope of similarity with reality. This is an absolute statement, and that is why you had to write how ideal types have certain similarity with reality, because after all, ideal types have come up because of study of reality. Max Weber, he studied authority, bureaucracy, Protestant ethic on ground, and then he came up with certain features of the ideal types. He could not have done it without studying reality. Similarly, we have this question on pattern variables. Here, if you have read Holborn, the blue book, you would have read about pattern variables set A and B. You remember Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft, given by Tonis. And Parsons had said that these pattern variables, they correspond to 2 set of societies, primitive and industrial. But later on he understood that he could not differentiate these variables too rigidly, because some societies, primitive societies, may also have features of industrial societies and vice versa. the second question. In the first part, which is on R.K. Merton, this question was a repeated question from 2006. So now you can understand that we cannot neglect questions which are or which have been asked before 2010. Many times we think that okay, we are going to do only the last 10 years question papers, but here the examiner has asked question which has already been asked in 2006. Therefore this point has to be taken care of, and please do not neglect those questions which have been asked before 2010. This question you could refer to Holborn or any other standard book. Here R.K. Merton, he refutes the propositions of the functionalist perspective of the social anthropologists like Malinowski. They said that every social institution or every structure of society had a certain function which was indispensable, which was universal, and also all these structures, they contributed to unity of the entire society. But Merton said that we were being too rigid. We were leaving no scope for any conflict, or what happened if there was a difference in function. What happened if the function of school which was there previously, if the function has changed, if the function of education has changed. So we should leave some scope for change also. This is what Merton tried to say. The next question about hierarchy and exclusion. This is a conceptual question based on stratification, and when we talk of exclusion, then we can try to define it, try to understand it in terms of gender, race, caste, class, nation, how some sections of society, how some nations of society are excluded. In the case of nations, for example, we have third world nations, developing nations. So why some advantages, some privileges, some technologies are confined or enjoyed by only the higher up in the hierarchy? This is what is to be written in this question, because when we have these features of hierarchy and exclusion, then they prove to be roadblocks to the path of social change. The next question, which asked about democracy as an order of society. Here we are talking about democracy as a social institution, as a political institution, and how it has certain features, how it has certain, let's say, hierarchy, how it is organized in a society in order to govern the people. We have read about nation state also, how we became independent, and then we adopted democracy as an order of our society. Here people were also given certain rights in order to take part in politics. For example, not active but indirectly we can vote. Directly if we want, then we can also dissent, or we can disapprove of the policies of the government, and we have the right to protest, agitate, and also come up with social movements. But what about direct entrance? What about direct participation in politics? Here the common people or the common man is restricted by power elite. So this question will revolve around this concept of power elite. The question on informalization of work because of capitalism, it was asked in different forms in 2017, and we will talk about post-Fordism and how we have different types of informalization. Every form of work need not necessarily be in a formal setup. There may be flexible working hours, there may be flexible policies, there may not be social security for the workers, there may not be good conditions for working, there may not be an age limit to work, there may be exploitation. So all these things will come under informalization of work. It can be found in many books, but Giddens is a good source for this book. There is a chapter on work and economy in Giddens, and you may go through it to understand what informalization of work means. Another question was on elementary forms of religious life. You know that Durkheim studied the Aboriginals and he found out that they practiced totemism. So in this question, we will write about totemism and the concept of sacredness in society, the worshipping of society, the solidarity which is reflected in society. But the next part is different. It talks about contemporary society and how religion is coming back in society through religious revivalism. So what are the consequences? Can we talk of organized religion here, or do we talk about sects, cults, denomination? What is the effect? Is it dividing people? Is it uniting people? Or is it causing division in society, in riots, in crime? So what is the consequence, or what are the consequences of religious revivalism in society? Then there was a question from paper 2 in paper 1, which was on across region marriage. And here we know that in India there are different kinship practices in the north as well as the southern region. In the northern regions, marriage between relatives is not permitted, while in south it is permitted. So what happens when people from north or people from south, they marry someone from north? What does the change happen in the kinship system, or how do they adjust to the new kinship system? This question is related to EPW article which was published in 2004. It spoke of declining sex ratio, because of which there were lesser number of marriageable women in the north and they had to marry people from the women from the south. Then there was a question on humanity at the mercy of nature, science and technology. Comment in the light of pandemic situation. Now here we could write about manufactured risk, because here there was a rumor, if you must know, about this virus coming from a laboratory. It is just a rumor, we have no evidence, but this concept is very much related to manufactured risk, which was given by Martin Rees. He said that in the modern society, we are relying too much on technology and we are coming up with newer experiments, newer machines, newer medicines, but all of these have a side effect too. And this side effect can be in the form of certain diseases. And how do we deal with this new devil or new monster? Because as we are seeing that vaccination or coming up with a vaccine for that particular disease takes time. Research takes time. But what happens in between? People will die in the absence of vaccine. Also, even after the vaccine has come, there may be certain deaths, there may be certain reactions, and some people may have to face death because the medicine perhaps does not suit them. So we are entering a global risk society given by Ulrich Beck. Then the pandemic also affected the informal sector, the migrants, and many people relied on work from home. So we were at the mercy of technology too, because everything became online, and those organizations, educational institutions which were not used to these online sessions on Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, they had to suffer and the children had to lose, and thus we can see that the pandemic situation has made it realize that humanity is indeed at the mercy of nature, science and technology. The next question is on education and how Durkheim says that the major function of education is the transmission of society's norms and values. So here he talks of cultural reproduction through socialization and how collective consciousness is reinforced in society. Another question on social mobility, it was a previous year question asked in 2008. It is a standard question and you would find it in any standard book. The next set of compulsory questions, the first one was on globalization and how it has affected the scope of sociology in India. Now, with globalization, what has happened, the issues which were happening in other parts of the world, they started affecting or reaching India too. For example, capitalism came to India because of globalization. Outsourcing of jobs happened, secularization happened, world became a global village. We also saw postmodernism, we saw ecofeminism. So all these have broadened the scope of sociology, right? Then the question on importance and sources of hypothesis in social research. You will find it in the research methods chapter of Nitin Sangwan. Then the next question, problems in observing social facts, is because it is not easily recognized. They are invisible, they are intangible, because of which it is difficult to observe social facts. You can give examples also. Now, does the institution of marriage continue to be sacred in Indian society? Here we will talk about marital breakdowns, alternatives to marriage, separation, empty shell marriage, live-in relationships, then various religious beliefs and practices. Here we will remember that Durkheim spoke of totemism. Then there were other types of practices like animism. Question 6. It was a current affair based question on the new labor codes and their impact on formal and informal labor. These new labor codes were on industrial relations, social security and occupational safety. So here if you are writing, then you should stress more on the informal part, because these laws will affect the informal economy, informal organization more than the formal organization of work. In the Mills question, we had to write on the triangle of power, which is of the political background, economic background and military background. So these elites, they rule in institutional terms rather than psychological. Institution because each part corresponds to an institution, right? A set of pattern, a set of rules, a set of beliefs. So they form a triangle of power and they rule the society. The next question, the strengths and weaknesses of social survey. It was a much easier question because you had to write only about the structured and unstructured type of social surveys, and you had to write about the pros and cons of each. For example, structure is more accurate, but it also is rigid. Similarly, unstructured gives a subjective perspective and it gives the complete picture, but it varies, and there is also subjectivity in the interpretation. The question 7. Technology has accelerated the process of development and dependency. This was from Social Change. And we had to write about dependency theory by Frank Cardoso, also about world system theory by Wallenstein. So this was a straightforward question. Now here, phenomenological perspectives in sociology. Here we would be writing about sociology and common sense, how for phenomenological perspective, common sense is also important, everyday knowledge, everyday life is important, and how man is the creator of social reality. In the Marxian theory of alienation, there were three thinkers in favor: Bowles and Gintis, Mills, Godds and Marcuse, and there were few thinkers who were against. They were Alasdair Clare and different functionalists. Question 8. What is the impact of gender division of labor on the development of society? So here you would be writing about Anne Oakley and how before industrialization what happened. Home was the economic unit, right? And men also participated in domestic life. Women were also involved in work. But after industrialization, there was a separation of this work from domestic responsibilities. Women were subordinated and they were confined to only the household work. They could not go out to work. So this division of labor has adversely affected the development of society. So even though we call ourselves modern, yet this division has reinforced differences, it has reinforced discrimination, and it might be one of the factors which would pull us back as a society. In this question, you may refer to feminist scholars. How does Marx view social conflict as an essential element in social change? You will be writing about changes in the forces of production and how Marx thinks of a revolution, probable revolution, which would be the final symbol of social change. The question on social movements, how do they come to an end? We are talking about the dissolution stage. There are two types or two ways in which a social movement ends. Either it becomes an enduring organization like some political party, or it may fade away. So now we will move on to paper 2. Here, the question on A.R. Desai, you can find it in B.K. Nagla. It was a straightforward question. And here we had to write about how traditions have their roots in India's economy and production relations. Then the question on definitional problems concerning the tribal communities. Here we would write about Arthur Wilk. He gave certain problems and we can write this. You will find it in Tribal India by Nadeem Hasnain. The next question on Dumont's on ideology. Here we are talking about the ideology of caste. How this ideology molds human behavior and how there is a dialectics. There is a difference between purity and pollution. The question on secularism. In GS we have read about M.N. Roy. Now this took place during the national movement and we adopted secularism and it was reinforced in the constitution. So we can say how constitution acts as an agent of social change. Though we were influenced by the West, we were influenced by the ideas of humanistic radicalism, that means equal treatment to humanity or human beings. So here, how did we reflect this ideal? We reflected it in the form of protection of minority communities. This minority would be religious minorities, how we included them in our society, in the new society. The question on banning practice of sati is attributed to annihilation of major social evil in colonial India. In this, we had to write about Ambedkar's study of caste and caste system. You must have heard about his book, Annihilation of Caste. So this question was based on that book. Here, he says that the evils such as sati, child marriage, prohibition of widow remarriage were the outcomes of caste. Question 2. Indian caste system is unique and has been unhealthy for the growth of sociology. Here you must have read about subaltern perspective. Now, the early sociologists, most of them were from the higher caste, and they focused on caste system in the village. They focused on the stratification and how the Brahmins were at the top of the hierarchy while the Shudras were at the bottom. Here, there was no parallel perspective, there was no alternate perspective, that was the only perspective. But the others who were left out from the mainstream sociology, the subaltern perspectives, they also wanted to be included. And that is why you can say that too much emphasis on the caste system led to the exclusion of this perspective. But try to write a balanced answer in this question. The next question on Whitehead, there is no mention in the standard text, although there have been many answers or probable answers, but we would skip this question if it were asked in the exam. Every year there is one question which is like tangential, so this question would come under that category. The next question, Indian rural society is a faction-ridden society. This was based on village studies and the rural structure. We could write about Anwer study on caste, class and power. Question 3. Examine the colonial policy of segregation of tribals under the Government of India Act 1935. You will find it in Indian Society Themes and Social Issues by Nadeem Hasnain. He talks of totally and partially excluded areas which were defined by the British in the Act of 1935, and you can also substantiate or support it with Surajit Sinha's views, who supports cultural autonomy of tribals. Then discuss the dynamics of migrant workers in India in the context of corona pandemic. Here you can write about reverse migration given by Jan Bremen, then how they were treated as untouchables on returning home and how they had to remain idle because they had no source of employment, and how this affected their family, their children, their health, their nutrition. The next question on Andhra Pradesh's middle class in India. He says that even though caste is still present and it will not vanish immediately, yet he says that the emergence of new middle class has affected the altering of caste. Question 4. Conceptual issues about lineage and descent. This was a direct question. You will find it in Nitin Sangwan. You can also write about patrilineal, matrilineal structures. Then the household dimensions of family in India. This will also be found in this book. Then the question on cultural pluralism. You can write about different religious practices. Also, you can write about N.K. Bose's assertion about unity and diversity of Indian civilization. And another point could be on sects and races which are present in Indian society. Section B, question 5. First question, chronic malnutrition. It was on population dynamics. Then the question was on green chemistry. It was in news in 2018. On rural and agrarian transformation. This question may or may not have been attempted by students. And the next question on citizenship, it was on CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act, and there was a chapter on social problems by Ram Ahuja. New education policy, it was an expected question, and a similar question has been asked in PYQ 2015. The question on democratic federalism and how does it promote decentralization of power, we could write about financial decentralization. In the new education policy, we could write about emphasis on local language, on gender inclusion, on the disadvantaged regions, tribal dominated areas, people from rural background, Divyang friendly. All these are signs of social inclusion. When we talk of democratic federalism in the times of COVID-19, how the state came forward to take responsibility of people and how it was given more power because the union would not be able to handle this emergency or this emergency situation of the pandemic, and therefore it had to delegate power to the state. There was decentralization of power. So COVID-19 gave more powers to the state. Question 6 about the minimum support price scheme for agricultural produce. Would it help in rural development? But here we also have farmers who are protesting because they believe that they will not, or the scheme will not benefit them. We have a sociologist, Professor Paramjit Singh Judge. You can write about him. He has been in the news in relation to this protest. In the skill development program and how is it inducing social change, you can name few schemes, how it is empowering the youth, the women, how it is leading to social mobility. It is making people more aware. Then the main issue of development planning in mixed economy like India. So what happens when there is a mixed economy? We would have to take care of rural areas. We would have to come up with small scale industries, small and medium enterprises. We cannot restrict ourselves to one form of enterprise, one form of industry. So we have to go for a mixed approach. And because we want all the sections to be included, how would we go for financial inclusion in a mixed economy? So the approach for urban areas would be different, rural areas would be different, government schemes would be different. Question 7. Elaborate the causes, consequences and concerns of growth of urban settlements in India. Causes you can write about. People move to other places because of marriage, employment, and how this leads to urbanization or rapid expansion of urban settlements. It also leads to slumification, poor hygiene, environmental pollution, affects the health of the people. Then the nature and scope of anthropogenic influence on climate change or climate in India, and also analyze the environmental movements arising out of it. We can talk of different projects. We can talk of interlinking of rivers. Along with the environment, it also affects people. People get displaced. The next question on farmers' movements. Here, we were to trace the change in the nature of protest. We have many sociologists, for example, Kathleen Gog. They have been studying land reforms, agrarian unrest, agrarian movements, agrarian transformation, and how we can see in today's times, how people, farmers, they have become more aware, more vigilant, more vocal about their rights. So all these have to be included in tracing the growth of social movement, of farmers' movement. Question 8. Colonial administrators helped to construct the very traditionalism which marked the Indian society as backward. Here it would refer to positive discrimination measures and the reservations to backward castes. Now here there would be two kinds of views. The Britishers, they were in favor of reservations, so there were many sociologists also who favored reservations. But on the other hand, we had few sociologists, few thinkers who opposed this reservation, and they wanted other alternatives to be given to these backward people. So when it is said here that you have to comment critically, you have to write both the views. The next question, salient features of the India's population policy. A similar question has been asked previously, and in this question you would write about infant mortality rate, MMR, maternal mortality rate, immunization, reproductive health, child health, and how far have we gone in terms of overpopulation, family planning. All these would be included here. In the causes of child labor, you could write about poverty, cheap labor, family pressure, bad habits, and how far government measures have succeeded. Is the public aware? What about trafficking? Now the major question before us is how to tackle paper 1 and paper 2. After going through 2020 papers, the paper 2 has been a kind of shock, while paper 1 was much easier, much direct. So when we think of a strategy for paper 1, we can recommend a few books. There will be few chapters from IGNOU, especially the Thinkers ESO 13 booklet. Haralambas, there are two Haralambas. First one is the blue Haralambas, which is Holborn, and second one is orange Haralambas or Held. You can go for either of them. Okay. Then there's another book, Sociology by Anthony Giddens. This will not be your primary text, but it will be your secondary text. It will help you enhance the quality of your answer. It will help you broaden your thinking. For thinkers, you will also refer to Ritzer few chapters and also the emergence of sociology. Needless to say, you have to go through the PYQs, and for completion of syllabus, you can go for Nitin Sangwan or any other notes which you prefer. Answer writing will come eventually, and then in this paper, as we saw that we also were asked questions on paper 2, therefore it is advisable for you to interrelate papers 1 and 2 whenever you are studying. Keep a track of the news, and whenever any social issue is in news, please maintain a book or please maintain a journal where you will note down all these news items. And finally, you will be opting for a point-wise note-making approach for the PYQs. What does this mean? It means you will not make notes for books. You will not take a particular book and start jotting down everything. No. After going through all these stages, finally you will take out your PYQs and you will start noting down points for each question. You should have at least 5 to 10 points for each question. For strategy of paper 2, you will be reading IGNOU selectively and B.K. Negla, all the thinkers which have been mentioned in the syllabus. We will be sharing which thinkers you have to study. You will also study chapters 1 and 7 along with the preface from Modernization of Indian Tradition by Yogendra Singh, Nitin Sangwan or other notes like Tusharanshu. They are good to cover the syllabus of paper 2, and everything is given at one place. You will be taking care of government policies, schemes and acts, and you will be tracking them in the newspaper. At least 2 years data you should have. There is a book, Social Problems by Ram Ahuja. You can go for the latest edition, and you are also advised to read issues of Yojana as well as Kurukshetra. These will give you an idea about rural development and also government schemes and policies. For note making, as already mentioned, PYQs will be your base, and you will start making notes of these PYQs after 2 readings of your study material. Please do not leave out any topic. You have to read all the topics of the syllabus. Don't be biased. Don't be don't have any favorites, because the examiner is not going to discriminate between different topics. For the examiner, every topic is important. Also, please keep a check on the notes of news. And another thing while note making is that you do not have to write everything. You only write whatever you will forget or you think you are going to forget. And finally, the instruction that I will give you is that please keep revising your notes and please keep updating your notes so that they always have the latest data. After seeing the paper 2, we have seen that there are many people who panicked. So my first advice would be to not panic on seeing paper 2, because every year paper 2 has a way of getting to you, has a way of making you nervous, and it will be an indirect question paper. It will not be a direct question paper. So you have to enhance your knowledge box, you have to enhance your knowledge base, increase your repository of knowledge, and from that repository you have to answer this question. There will be surprise questions, but you should understand that these questions will surprise everyone. And as mentioned by one of our students who has appeared this year, he said that you must attempt questions with a calm mind. That is the most important thing, because you never know, you might write answers more beautifully, more correctly when you are in a peaceful state. And that is why for paper 2, your major battle will be to calm your mind, to calm your nerves, and this battle has to be fought first before you start writing the paper. Next week onwards, we will be starting with a weekly plan for TFTs or tasks for today. We will have 2 TFTs in a week. First one will be on Sundays. It will refer to the static portion, and especially we will be concentrating on paper 2. For the dynamic portion, this schedule will be flexible, and whenever there is a relevant social issue is in news, we will come up with this particular TFT. In the forthcoming lectures, we are planning to cover the following thinkers. First one will be Yogendra Singh, then G.S. Ghurye, M.N. Srinivas, A.R. Desai, Louis Dumont, Andhra Bhate, Subaltern Perspective, Village Studies, and then finally Dipankar Gupta, Kathleen Gog, Iravati Kadve, and Tribal Studies. These are all from paper 2. For paper 1, from the standard textbooks, you have to study the following chapters. In Haralambus, you will be studying social stratification, families and households, religion and beliefs, power and politics, methodology, and sociological theory. From Anthony Giddens, you will be studying global inequality, work and economic life, cities and urban spaces, the environment and risk, globalization and social change. Ritzav, you will be referring for depth, and IGNOU ESO 13 you will be studying. After going through CSM 2020 question papers, we have realized that there are a few extra chapters that you need to study. From Haralambus, you will also be studying the chapter on education and poverty, social exclusion, and the welfare state. Similarly, from Giddens, you will be studying theories and perspectives, which will include postmodernism and also race, ethnicity, and migration. The common question before students is which thinkers to study in paper 2. Some thinkers have been mentioned while others have not been mentioned. These provide a brief overview of the thinkers that you need to study. We will be covering them in the forthcoming lectures, and you are requested to go through those TFTs in detail and try to read the study material that we provide or we mention in the TFT. Now, how to study sociology in news? The first stage would be that you will have to try to place the news under appropriate topic of the syllabus. Whenever you see or read a social issue in the news, then your first job will be to place it in the syllabus. The next stage would be to understand the issue from a GS perspective. This is the most important stage. Most of the times the candidates make a mistake, which is that after placing the news under the syllabus, they jump to the third stage, which is relating the issue to social structure and social change, or analyzing an issue sociologically. Before analyzing any issue from sociological point of view, you are required to understand a generalist perspective of the issue, or understand the issue from GS point of view. Try to gather all the points, only then you go to the next stage. And finally, your task is to find a thinker for that issue. And how do we do it? You will either refer to your study material. If you do not find any thinker for that particular topic, you are advised to Google. In sociology, Google will be your best help, and you are advised to maintain a separate folder or folder for this section. Therefore, it can be summed up as sociology in news. You will start with a generalist perspective, then you will travel to sociological perspective, and finally you will reach to a complete understanding of that particular issue. While preparing, please maintain a balance between reading and writing. Don't over focus on writing, don't over focus on note making. Focus on reading also. First understand, grasp, only then go for writing. Because sometimes we focus too much on writing. Please read your text at least twice. While note making, revise them, and don't note down everything, only that much which you are going to forget. Especially the keywords, diagrams, flowcharts should be included in your notes. Remember your thinkers and find at least 2-3 thinkers from either your textbook or from Google. This brings us to the end of today's session. We hope you have benefited, and if you have any further queries, please drop a message in the group at Brainstorming Sociology. We wish you all the very best for your sociology preparation. Do well, study hard, and may victory be yours. Thank you.